So here we are. We got Rashay Stewart, and you had quite the experience with the dog. So I asked you a little bit ago that two people have had this happen where they have lost, what you think is the collar failing, right, Rashay?
Yeah.
I mean, your first instinct is you told me time and time again, like, maybe the collar fell off, maybe it's this, and I'm like, no, it's on the dog, Rashay. Like, the collar is not. It's like, and and I had a similar story from another buddy that was heading out to help us another situation. Unfortunately, that wasn't as good of a turnout as your situation, but I asked you if you'd come join us and we can kind of talk about some of the things that I was telling you about to try to help you find your dog when this disaster happened. So before we get into that, how's the dog doing?
She's doing great. She went hunting yesterday or day before, and she was better than she's ever been. She was so hyped to go, and I was a little worried. 5 days in a hole, you'd think it'd do something too. I mean, it'd do something to a person.
You'd think you'd skip around some holes, probably. You'd be like, there's a hole there.
You'd think, but no, that twerp, they ended up actually finding a den under a dang old tree, and I'm like, nope, we're not doing that again. But she went out there like $1 million, and I joked around.
So we already told. So hold on. So let's go ahead and tell them the story of what happened.
Okay.
So obviously people know that the dog was in a hole, but so what happened that morning? You started. How was what was happening?
Well, it was just me and my 4 girls. I got 11, 7, 5, and 3. And the 3-year-old I'll throw in a pack and take out with us. And we decided we were going to go run dogs. And we'd only taken 1 young dog with us. Everybody else experienced. So, it's going to be a good day. And we go out in an area that we've been a couple times, but not too much. But I knew exactly where there was this cat. And it was a good-sized Tom, and it frequented the area a lot. And so we go in there, and
so there's 5 of you. There's
yep.
You and just 3 kids.
4 kids.
4 kids.
4 kids.
4
yep.
Yeah, 4 girls plus Rashay, buddy.
Right.
So just me, the 4 girls, and we had 6 dogs with us. And so we go out, dogs end up taking this track, know it's this cat. And again, we hadn't run that cat. We just had seen sign. We know that cat's in the area. We'd been out there in the snow and what have you. So anyway, they take this cat and they go up the creek bed, and it's picture perfect. The road sat right above the creek.
Have you guys caught cats by yourself, you and the girls?
No. Nope.
Okay.
We've got
I'm just setting the stage for everybody. Like, this is, you guys are like on cloud 9. You're out there, probably like ready to roll, trying to be big girls out there.
Well, and I think something too is our oldest, she goes with Dad, and all of us go together. As a whole family, we do every bit of this together. And though she's okay, her and I will walk into a tree, or the girls and me and Dad maybe is packing in the little one. It's not just us. And it was a gorgeous day, and we're like, no, Dad's sick. We're doing it. We're going out and taking the dogs. And so, it was an absolute cloud 9. It couldn't have kind of rolled out better. Going back to how this road sat above this creek bed. I mean, you got to watch the whole race, and it was perfect.
Was that a cold trail, or was it pretty hot track?
It was I think it was more cold. They didn't really blow up on it. They kind of moved it along before they started barking. Our dogs don't bark a lot as it is until it gets warmer, but they didn't get, I'd say they probably started opening about 3/4 of a mile into it. And again, we're watching this whole thing, and the creek kind of turned and they went, and the road, I didn't know that the roads real well out there. And so I was like, okay, 280 yards, that ain't too bad of a walk. And we were listening to the dogs, and they start barking as though they're treed. And I'm like, all right, girls, let's go. And I start getting kids rounded up. And I had a couple dogs who were running a track. And so we weren't very far from them, but like maybe 50 yards. And it's great going with the kids, but sometimes it's a little, I think, distracting for the dogs because they hear the kids and they come and check in. And that's kind of what happened. And the dog, Letty, actually did that. She ended up coming back to the truck. And
so hold on. So Letty's the dog that went missing?
Yes. Yep. She's the one that ended up.
So so you've seen her when you guys were hiking into the tree. You seen Letty.
Yeah.
Letty came out to you.
Yep. We started walking in, and she was right behind us, and you could see they kind of stopped and listened, and the couple dogs that were there, and they went bombing in there. Well, Letty doesn't bark a lot, and we kind of laugh about it because she's kind of management. She goes in there, okay, everybody's barking. All right, I'll bark a little bit. Now, if nobody's hammering that tree, she'll bark a lot. Or, if it's on the ground, she'll come in and she'll have, her say about the situation and be right involved. If it's in a hole, she's one of the first, if not second, right in there. And we heard her open, and we're like, man, awesome. We're bombing in there. And kind of to go back to setting the stage a little bit of this situation, we get in here, and we were not expecting it to be as steep as it was. It was hands down probably the steepest, crappiest country we could have been in. And, here I am by myself with all the kids. And fortunately, my girls kind of just roll with it. They're like, yeah, we're doing this. Like, this is just what we're doing. And we get in there. We get up on...
So when you say steep, you're trying to climb up to the tree?
Yeah, just get to where they're at. And we don't even know if they're at the tree. We don't know exactly the situation. It's along the creek bed. It's loud. And so we're literally hands and knees climbing up the hillside and trying to kind of get to a viewpoint and just get closer to these dogs. And we get to the top of this little knoll, and I'm not joking. This was something straight out of a Disney movie. It was this waterfall, and the dogs are what looks to be treeing above this waterfall. And you're just like, holy smokes, look at this. And I even said that. I'm like, girls, look. And you get, wow. And then my heart sank as I saw one of our other dogs back out of this hole at the very top and the edge of this waterfall. And the waterfall was actually an old wooden culvert. And
yeah, I seen pictures of that you sent me, and it was like I don't know how to describe it, but like a timbered frame mine shaft is the best I could describe it. It was almost like a mine shaft in the side of the hill.
So what it actually, I wasn't sure about it initially, but talking to a gentleman that has lived out there for years, and he ended up actually coming and helping on the whole ordeal. But he was telling me that, so it's railroad ties that built this mine shaft, or not mine shaft, but it's a culvert. It's a culvert. And so they used these railroad ties to build this culvert, and then they actually brought in, like the pit run and all the gravel and rock and everything that, they brought on the mountainside. Well, they brought that in and they filled it in. And there's a railroad track that sits at the very top of this whole ordeal. And I'm not kidding. From the point of this culvert to the top of where the railroad track is probably about 100 feet. And there, so
really?
if you can imagine, it's just all this super loose. I mean, it's not super loose anymore in the sense of like it's fresh because it's really old, but you get to walking on it, you're sliding backwards.
Yeah.
And so, we weren't quite to the point of, the kids and I weren't quite to the point of walking on that part, but you could see the dogs kind of sliding down it. And yeah, there was, vegetation and everything over it, but it was just bad ground. So I eventually get in there though, and I plop the kids at the base of a great big old tree and don't move. And my oldest and I go down and start tying off dogs because this one dog just keeps going in this hole. And Letty, the dog that I couldn't find, well, sure enough, I still can't find her. And, we're looking everywhere. And I actually ended up crawling in this hole, and I shouldn't have because of how bad and how loose everything was. But I crawl in this hole, and I crawl past my butt, and I tell my oldest, I'm like, Ad, anything happens, just yank me out by my feet, do whatever you can to get me out. And if you can't get me out, well, there's enough people out here. Go find somebody. I'm like, just leave your sisters right there. They'll be okay. And, my kids, thank God, they kind of plan for it. Luckily, my girls are okay, Mom. And they don't freak out. They kind of take everything as a grain of salt until they have to deal with a situation. And so I crawl in this hole, and I'm thinking there's no way this dog is in there. I can't find any direction. Maybe there's a little bit of a turn in there, but I reach in there and it's solid. Everything is solid. And so I'm like, okay, there's no way there's a dog in here. Like, at that point, I'm all annoyed with my dog. Like, you idiot. Like, there's nothing in here. You're just barking at a random hole. But I can't find this dog. And it says that she's, her last signal is here. But I have communication with her. And so I'm toning and, I think it's everybody's last resort where you turn it up and you shock them to hopefully you can hear where they're maybe at. Nothing.
Yeah, that seems to be everybody's go-to method.
That's the last resort, though.
It is. Yeah, I turned on lights. I did the whole 9 yards. But
so you figured out that there's no cat in the tree. You got the dogs. You got 4 girls with you, and so when I came through, I had seen it in the morning. I seen your post. Which is mistake number 1, Rashay. You said you were, I think in your mind, you were hoping that dog got out of there and that it was going to get run into town somewhere and somebody's going to pick it up, because I didn't fully read. I don't read a lot of the stuff. So I was skimming through and I seen the message on Facebook that you were talking about. I think you said vets and stuff. You had talking to different vets in different areas, right? Was that your post?
So I had dogs with salmon poisoning a couple days before that. And so that was that last post. And then that morning, or not that morning, that evening after the whole situation, I posted that Letty was missing. And I actually, where we were at, it was state ground, and there was quite a few people out there. And so I didn't know if somebody had, say, picked her up. Where we were, they shouldn't have, but who knows if, say, the collar glitched and that just was last place she was, and she, they caught it. She saw it as it came out a different part of the hole. Who knows? But it was everything but that she was in there.
Right. You were really, because I talked to you. I don't know what day I talked to you.
It was
I
the
went
next
hunting.
day.
So I think I shared it because I thought you had a lost dog. And so I was like, I try to share those lost dog posts. And I just assumed that it was a lost dog in town or, got away. And I didn't read the post to the full extent of what you had going on, And it wasn't until I got back home from hunting or whatever. And I was sitting on the couch and and I actually read your post. Actually, it was my post because I shared it. So I was like, oh, read what I shared. And I was like, oh shit. And that was when I called you, because I was like, what you were seeing. And I'll be honest, there were some people that were trying to tell you exactly what I was trying to explain to you, was like, if you're in that situation where you don't have a GPS signal, and that's why I wanted to talk to you, is because there's a lot of different ways that can happen. One of them is the dog goes underground in your situation. Yep. There are other situations that the collar gets damaged. It can get bit. It can get, a software issue, you know what I mean? If it locks up, GPS lock up, there's just several different things that can happen. And so that was what my goal in this podcast is, to talk about kind of what I talked you through in the beginning. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because you were pretty adamant. You were like, well, maybe the collar fell off, or maybe the dog's gone. I'm like, Rashay, the dog is there. I promise you, if you get in communication, that dog is there somewhere. Yeah. And I was really adamant. I was like, you gotta, if you're communicating, and it's happened to another guy. And I told him, I said, if you're communicating with the dog is there. Yeah. Like you have to open up and think honestly like an engineer or something like that, because it's like you get into this technical realm of what to do. And we're going to try and cover some of those topics. So anyways, perfect lead in, Rashay. So you get there, you have an A day, and like Disney, it just falls apart once you get past the waterfall and the glitter coming down and all that. And it's like, turns into and at that point, when you guys are leaving there with the dog, I can only imagine with 4 little girls in tow and leaving a dog behind. That's probably, we're everything turned out, but I'm sure that was a pretty miserable drive home.
It was. And, it was a pretty miserable walk. My 5-year-old is a little more fond of this dog. This dog kind of has taken it upon herself to be real attached to her. And Letty, actually, she had kind of a bad medical situation about 6 months ago. And that dog actually ended up having a blood transfusion, a whole 9 yards. We paid all this money to save her. And so then to have this happen, it's like, wait, you can't almost die on me twice in 6 months. And
I want a refund.
Yeah.
I can afford that. Can I get my money back at least?
It was just that salt in the wound. I'm like, this is a kick in the gut. And so we're walking out of there, and I've got kids that are tearing up, and I'm like, hey, you know what? We can cry at the truck. You can't cry when we're out here. We can have our meltdown when we get to the truck. And I'm like, we've got a whole walk still. And so here, I'm also trying to keep my spirits up about the whole situation, because I'm just at a loss. I didn't expect the collar to come off, but the only reason why I did think that it could possibly was because my oldest, she's still only 11. She put the collar on that morning, and I thought I checked it, but I can't say for sure. And that was the only reason why I thought maybe. But so no, we're headed home, and we don't have service out there at all. And so I get to service, and I called Jared, and I'm like, hey, I need your help. Letty's missing. And so he ends up meeting me. And like I said, he was home sick.
Why was he not there?
He was sick.
He was sick, man.
He was super
sick as a dog.
Yeah. Jason, turn your mic up.
Man, if I turn this up much more.
Or get closer to it, but
Colby is going to hate me, man.
Okay. We have a hard time hearing you.
So, I can't see the levels for some reason.
Yeah, you're not even registering. Yeah. So Jared was sick, so you wake him up or whatever.
I did. I called him like 3 times. I woke him up. I'm like, I need your help. And, it was just kind of one of those at that point. Like, I could have sat there and dug. I could have sat there and done all the things. But when I got all the girls, it ends up being a safety thing with them. And I'm like, I can't do that and watch them and, make sure they're not getting too cold and stuff. So it's like, called him. He gets out there, and he's at a loss. It's just about as much as me.
Right. Because you guys were there. And so you'd look at the GPS and you had communication, right? So you had communication. And so what I want people to know about the first time when you see this happen is the GPS signal went away. So the caller, because the dog went underground, it could not talk to the satellites to figure out its location. Now, it should have had a question mark somewhere close to the area. In steep ground, it could be 40, 50 yards off, depending on, where it is. So where was your question mark at?
My question mark was actually like, it kept going back to the hole. Where I was at, it was doing about a 40-foot ping pong. So it would say there, and then it would say like 30 feet over here. Or then it'd say 20 feet over there. And so it was like ping ponging there.
But it kept driving you to that hole. Like you kept going around that hole.
Yep. Yeah. And in the past.
And how close was that hole to the waterfall?
It was directly above it.
Yeah.
Okay. The bottom of the hole may have ended up touching the top of the actual like bracing and stuff in there.
So in your mind, you're looking at this waterfall thinking the dog probably fell off the waterfall. Is what where my mind would go was like, oh crap, did the dog fall off the waterfall?
Yeah, and that was my first thought, thinking, the collar's underwater, because typically when we have a dog go in a hole or culvert, I don't have communication either. I'll lose GPS and I'll lose communication. But I had communication, and so that's what was throwing me off. And so, I went and looked, and we scoured that waterfall. There wasn't a ton of water actually coming through it, and it was just a straight rock face. There was no holes, nothing in it. I mean, I think the creek bed, the deepest it was maybe to your calf. So you would have seen anything or something in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it kept giving me four bars of the communication. And so I wasn't entirely convinced she was in the hole, just because in past experience, both of those usually show up as
not really. So most of the time, it depends on the situation, on where the hole is. But when you're close enough, that signal should travel through the hole pretty good. The satellite, so the caller can't communicate with the satellites.
Yeah.
And that's what you'll lose. And so the first thing I tell people is to confirm that you're actually talking to the caller is I like somebody to change the update rate. So if you watch that caller, so if say you're hunting with a 2.5 second update rate or 5 second update rate, and I had this happen to a dog a long time ago. It wasn't in a hole. It was a caller that failed. And so it lost GPS signal while the dog was, I believe the dog was treeing. I never did find it when it was treed, but I was getting bark detection or bark alerts on it. So I know the dog was barking. But anyways, if you change the update rate and say you're running a 5 second update rate, you change it to 30 seconds. It'll take a few minutes, but then you'll watch it switch over and it'll go and it'll show that caller at 30 seconds. And if the caller doesn't change, so that's one piece of information that comes from the caller, right? That's not a handheld information. So when these callers send out their signal, they're sending out several different types of information. One of those informations is the GPS location, right? And so in your situation, it was like, I don't know my GPS location. So it sends out a question mark, right? So that's not very helpful. But in that signal, embedded in that signal that goes out every time, there's bark detection. The little alert that says if the dog's barking or not, that signal, the update rate, the caller tells you what update rate it's on. So it knows, the handhelds can know what time to listen for the next one. And treed, pointing, different alerts, running, the caller knows its state. So those situations. Now, the thing about treed, pointing, and running, they all require GPS to tell you, for the caller to tell if it's treed, running, or whatever. So you're not going to get treed alerts if you don't have the GPS signal. But bark detection is a separate issue because it's a different waypoint. And then battery life. Battery life is also sent from the caller to the handheld in that signal. I think that's about it. I think those are the main. Am I forgetting anything? I don't think so. So,
Collar light.
anyways,
Or no,
what's that?
I'm sorry. That's the collar lights are a command.
Yep,
You
that's
don't
a
actually
command.
see the change. Or the wake mode, if you're dealing with an X or a mini, you can use, right? 'Cause
But I
it'll
don't.
switch your option.
There's no way to tell. So, and I would not recommend sleeping. Well, I'm nervous about sleeping a collar that
Yeah.
is.
That you have communication with now.
You have communication on. So
Is that
Yeah.
that rescue mode for those older collars? Okay.
So rescue mode, and everybody should put rescue mode on right now. If you're listening to this and you don't know if rescue mode's on or off, 100% everybody should turn your rescue mode on, which all that does is it says if you're on 2.5 second update rates. What were you hunting with? What was the speed of update rate?
Originally it was a 2.5 second, and then I actually swapped it over to 2 minutes.
Okay.
So I was able to
That's
talk
genius.
with it.
So if you weren't able to talk with it, you would it would automatically switch over to 2 minutes after when it gets down to about a quarter of the battery life.
Okay.
So that's what rescue mode is rescue mode will run at the update rate you want to run at until the battery gets too low. And then it assumes, well, you haven't picked that dog up for 30 hours. Let's go to 2 minute update rates. So really for most of the way we hunt, it's foolish not to have rescue mode on, because it basically, if that dog runs out of your sight or you lose your handheld or something happens and you can't pick that dog up, at least, and this is what I told Garmin whenever we were going from the TT10s to the TT15s, I said, hey, if I don't have my dog within 30 hours or whatever, so those TT15 collars, they last about 40 to 42 hours, right? Give or take. On 2.5 second updates, you're probably in the 30-hour mark. You know what I mean? So if you're running 2.5 second updates, you probably got 30 hours of battery life.
And I'd say that was probably
Maybe
about
24.
what Letty's was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So and I tell Garmin, I'm like, if I'm hunting and I don't have my dog after 14 hours, I don't care in every 2 minute or 2 second update. I care make that battery last as long as I can, right? So at some point I want that 2 minute update rate changed over. And so and the thing about the 15s, and I think the 15Xs or whatever, it's not really an easy way to tell if rescue mode is on or off. So you just got to do it. And then but there's no screen that you could look at and go, oh, this one's on, this one's on. So what I just tell people is just go make sure you run through every single collar you have and just turn rescue mode on. And that'll automatically change its 2 minute update rates. And so the frustrating part that can happen when you do that is you'll be hunting and all of a sudden
not notice it.
Yeah, you didn't notice that collar was dead or something, and you're like, what in the hell is Shelby doing? Getting her, I mean, that
We're
dog should
calling
be up
that
front.
dog. It's running behind.
Yeah, she's barking behind. They're going to shock her because she's barking behind. And you'll have these other dogs run on 2.5 second update rates, and Shelby will be like 2 minutes behind, or about a minute and 45 seconds behind, and you're like, and you can hear her just bark, and I'm like, that bitch is behind and barking. So you just gotta be careful not to, you know what I mean? Like when that happens, and I've seen that happen, where a collar will switch to 2 minute update rates, because when I seen it, it was a software issue. Honestly, I think we fixed that issue with Garmin, but this was maybe 4 years ago. But the battery would get confused and think it was dead, and so it'd go dead, and then all of a sudden it'd flip it to 2 minute update rates, and then it was like, oh shoot, I'm really not dead. I'd have a full battery, and so there was a software problem that made it switch over. Little frustrating, but I'll take that over some other errors that have happened before. So, anyways, that's in a nutshell rescue mode. If just be prepared. If you see something running behind or whatever, go check the update rate and go, oh, it's on 2 minute updates. And if you're like, I didn't change the 2 minute update rates, that's because of the rescue mode. And most of the time, like I said, a couple of years ago, there was a software issue. If you're running a TT15 collar and you haven't updated, and we get this question a lot from people, like, hey, my collar's doing this. And we're like, hey, when's the last time you updated software?
What's the first question you ask, buddy?
Yeah. So that's a really good, I know people all the time, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I'm like,
they hate that answer.
But it will be broke one day. maybe you're not lucky, maybe you aren't. But these things do happen. I've seen them happen, and so sometimes there's a legitimate reason for software updates. Not saying it's the end all be all and it's the thing, and we always go to that. But
don't
that's
hate
just
us
a
situation.
For asking. Yeah. So rescue mode. I think we've covered that. I can circle the wagon, as some people would say. Go into 2-minute update rates. That's going to give you more time to figure out. But the other thing it does is it tells you that you're communicating with the caller, right? And that's what I kind of told you.
Communication range.
Yeah, that's when I was talking to Rashay that night, And when I talked to you guys are like, it was on your last bar of battery, I think, right? You were like, oh, it's red.
Yeah, we had left and we'd come back and Jared was going to go back out and it was the last bar. And when he went back out, unfortunately, it was already dead. And so we weren't able to use, your bit of information there. But
right. But you did do some things, because I know you kept trying to explain like, well, maybe the collar fell off or, and this is normal. This is absolutely normal because last year, me and James had a situation where we had a failure. The dog went off the bottom. We lost signal and we had a question mark right in a rock hole. I mean, in a rock hole to the point where we're basically in tears up on the mountain. Like, if we had 4 little girls, it'd be like, you can cry now. We got to wait for the truck. We're all going to just cry together. But same thing. We thought for sure it was in a hole. And so I know that, I mean, it's a really crappy feeling, but anyways, when you can communicate with that caller and you watch that update rate change in your head, you have to just say, I don't care. I don't care what my mind is telling me that the dog could be over here or whatever. I'm talking to the dog. Mm-hmm. I'm talking to that caller. That does not mean it's right there next to you. It doesn't mean that it didn't get picked up. It didn't mean that there's a lot of things it doesn't mean. But what it does mean is that caller is still functioning somewhat and it's responding to you. And then you got to have this puzzle without the GPS to figure it out. And so
it's the like next thing, beatboxing again.
Yeah, exactly. So the next thing I told you was I want you to take the antenna off of the collar, right?
Yep.
And that's a really important step. And most of the time, if you're not within 100 yards of that collar, you're going to lose it. The signal's going to drop off and it's going to go to zero.
But he meant take the handheld antenna off, not the collar antenna.
Yeah, if you could get to the dog, take the antenna out.
Yeah, if you could just find your dog real quick and pull that antenna off.
Yeah, so absolutely, yeah, the handheld antenna. So if you're looking and
it's like an attenuator on a blue box is what I always tell people. Like the old school guys know because it like cuts your gain, basically. You're taking away that reception. And by pulling that antenna, it's like, okay, well, we can't read a signal a mile out, but we can read it 100 yards, 200 yards. And that's what you're doing is you're trying to stair step it. It's like backing that gain knob back down, flipping the attenuator. Next thing you know, dogs are around the next corner,
Yeah. So everybody, it's funny. We just come off these podcasts of talking about antennas and getting like 6 miles and 7 miles, getting all these big ranges. And in these situations, I'm like, I want an antenna that really gets shitty miles. You know what I mean? Like I can turn that down. Like, okay, I got a mile. Here's like a dial where it's like those blue boxes where you turn that attenuator down. You know what I mean? Like I was thinking, man, if we could have a little, we call it
crap variable antenna.
Exactly. We want we're variable the crap and be like, get to the point where you can only track 100 yards. I'm like, man, I don't know how many we'd sell, But I would have one in my kit because that's exactly what I'd go to is finding an antenna. So sometimes we think of these antennas, we want the best. We want, we've been talking about these truck antennas and getting miles and ranges and all that.
The triple mag mount antenna.
Yeah. Which we sell at T's Plug.
We do sell, but you missed the sales price, but they're still pretty good.
By a couple of days.
Product plug.
So, it would be helpful, and this is what I want people's mindset to be. When you're in that situation where you have no GPS, so the dog is a question mark, but you're getting battery and you're getting communication. That's all you got to find your dog. And so you have to change something to be able to put the puzzle together. And what I was trying to tell you was, I talked to Brad, and they went and had to find another situation, and same situation, the dog went in a hole. And I told him, I said, when you're looking at that signal, that communication signal, and you got 5 bars, you got to think, maybe that dog's up high and I'm getting a really good clear line of sight. He could be 900 yards, half mile away and just good line of sight. And you got really a good signal. Or he could be really close to you. You know what I mean? There's 2 different ways that you would get a high signal, And so you have to eliminate one of them. And so it's hard to figure out, is the dog really high or is the dog really close? So when you leave that area and the signal starts going away, then you can go, okay, I'm pretty sure I was close to that dog. You know what I mean? But if you leave that area and the signal stays high, you would assume, okay, there's a good chance that dog may be up above me, up high somewhere where he's just, that signal's really line of sight.
Yeah, you're able to really hone in that perimeter of where that dog might be able to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're using the land to decipher. I mean, really, It's like using a directional antenna, but using the land to block that antenna reception.
And so thinking about it, in our terrain, we got ridges and creeks. And so when you go around the mountain, you go in and out around these ridges, these little finger ridges, our logging roads, as they go in and out of these draws. And you should be watching those draws, your signal, when you're driving into that situation, because you should see a weak signal. And you don't want to be on 2.5 or 2 minute update rates when you're doing this. Like you need to be on a faster update rate. I'd say 5 seconds would be ideal. I don't know. 2.5 seconds might be a little much, if you're worried about battery life, you know what I mean? It's all a game of weighing, right? You're getting information and you're spending battery life to get that information. And so 2.5 second updates may spend too much battery for you to get it. But 5 seconds, and you just drive slow. And if you wait 20 seconds, you'll get 4 hits and you'll be like, okay, that battery's, or that signals this after, sit in one spot for 20 or 30 seconds and watch that signal and then move to the next spot. And like Jason said, use the land to block the signal. So if you think, maybe going on the other side of that hill, on the other side of that culvert, and if it just cut out, you might be like, hey, I know it's on this side of the culvert. You know what I mean? Like I get no signal right here. I get a lot of signal right here. And so those are just things that people need to think about when this happens. So,
well, and we actually ended up kind of doing that unknowingly because we would move away from kind of where that hole was or be on top of the hill. We had another buddy come out there and we hooked our collar up to his handheld thinking, okay, well, maybe he can pick it up a little bit differently or something. And that communication signal, when he got within, I'm not kidding, it was kind of that 40-foot circle when he was right there, at least in this particular situation, he had, those full bars of communication. You go on just the other side of that hill and it was nothing. You go just left or right of that hole outside of that kind of 40-foot circle and you just instantly start dropping. And like I said, that was just this particular situation. Like you said, maybe it's that perfect line of sight in other scenarios, but yeah.
How many times did you walk over not knowing it? Like, how many times do you think somebody walked over that dog? Because I feel really bad. Actually, I was replaying this in my head because I remember talking to you first, and then we came down like sick, and I kind of just backed off because I knew you had a bunch of people like helping you out. But I remember talking to you, and I said, well, the good thing is you're getting some bounce. So if you're getting a bounce, like that tells me that collar's there. And you said something about a hole. And I said, are you sure she's not in a hole? And you said, I checked everything. Like there's not a hole big enough here for her to hide in. Right. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, I'll be honest. Like I'm going to say this because obviously the dog's okay. Now I thought the dog went down the waterfall and was somewhere that you weren't going to find it. You know, crashed in the pointy rocks at the bottom. That was the
immediate thought.
Right. That was kind of my thought of what was going on. Because with what you were saying, I kind of had an idea like that dog's there somewhere. And you said, I've checked all these holes. And I really thinking back, I'm like, I want to tell her to just keep looking, but I'm not in that situation. And you sent me the photos. And I'm like, dang it. I wonder if it's just like in a pool right there.
Yeah.
Or, you know, something was going on. But when you're getting that signal bounce and some kind of movement, it's at least a good sign versus, you know, when you used to get a GPS lock and you got a dog icon on your screen, but yet there's nothing there, you know, at least that way, you know, there's something going on.
Well, and that's usually what we get because we have one dog. I hate it, but he goes in culverts and he will get himself stuck in culverts. And this is unfortunately not the first situation of having to dig a dog out of a bad situation. You know, he's gotten himself stuck in culverts where it's crushed on one end.
So how long do you guys have to dig to get that dog out? So we've talked about how to find it. And I think I've covered most of what I wanted to cover, which was let's
the trick.
Just go back one through more time.
Yeah.
Stop. You know when you go to those trainings like first aid trainings or whatever, and they're like
stop,
all
drop,
the stupid roll. Stuff. Yeah, you're like stop, think. When you get lost in the woods, you got to stop and you need to think and you need to do all that.
It's like one of those fancy acronyms, right? Or whatever.
Yeah. But that's no shit. That's what you kind of need to do is just stop, slow things down and think, because your mind's going to go a million miles an hour in these situations. And you're going to talk yourself into a lot of different things that are not true. Like that hole's too small for that dog. You know what I mean? Like there's a ton of different things that you can talk yourself into, and the truth, because what do they call that? My truth. You know, like there's the truth, and then there's my truth.
Yeah,
and,
right.
You'll talk yourself into your truth, and it ain't gonna be the truth.
If a 350-pound bear can fit in an 8-inch culvert, you'd be amazed what a dog can squeeze into without you wanting it.
Well, in this situation, it had fallen in behind her, and because it was wet and just so crappy, it just went solid. And it was like, how is that even possible? Because you'd think that if a hole falls in, the whole entire thing is going to fall in, not just part of it. Yeah. But no, it was just part of it. It fell in behind her.
So we want to stop. And we want to look at the signal. We want to check, make sure that communication signal, everybody. And it's frustrating because I feel like I'm a broken record because I've said this before, but I want to, when you see this on there, when you see people, and I've seen people on the internet, I even seen it on your post where they're like, take the antenna, you know, they're trying to give you advice. And we just got to be methodical that, sometimes it's hard to explain, and you know, there's a million different things. Everybody's got this whole thing coming through on social media, but I want to get people to get the message out when they have a dog in this situation, that the best thing you can do is look at the communication bars and try to shrink and grow the communication, and then in your head figure out why you're shrinking and growing that communication, and isolate it down to, okay, I can shrink it when I walk away from this hole. I can grow it when I walk towards this hole. there's a high possibility my dog's in that hole.
Yep.
Or to say, I can shrink it when I drive around this ridge, and I grow it when I go in this little drainage. There's a high possibility my dog is in this drainage.
Yeah.
And even though the GPS may say the dog is a quarter of a mile to the right of that drainage, if you get communications a quarter mile or mile over, and it's like, I know the question mark's over there, but my signal is here. And that's the second part of this. Both of these situations, question marks were right there near the hole, basically. And the two dogs that I know of this week that went underground, both had question marks near the hole. The Garmin collar, and that's the other thing. Everybody blames the Garmin. Oh, the Garmin failed. Da, da, da. No, the Garmin can't communicate once it's in a hole. So it was giving you the last known location it was before it went in the hole. So those are the things you want to look at. Now, the flip side, before we finish your story, is let's say, and here's a good scenario, entirely different scenario. So let's just for a second, let's for a second pretend that you weren't getting a signal near that hole. You were getting a signal a half a mile away. Okay. You're like, buddy, when I drive to my thing, I get the signal half a mile away, but my question mark's at this hole. I think the dog's in the hole. And so I would say, go where the signal is good. And again, take the antenna off. And if you're a half mile away with your antenna off and you change the update rate on that collar with no antenna, you're within 100 yards of that collar.
Yeah.
I don't care what the question mark says. Ignore the question mark. The question mark is wrong. Something happened where that question mark is. Maybe the critter bit the collar and broke the wire. You know what I mean? On the collar. So there's a little wire that runs between the two boxes. Maybe it got snagged in a stick right there. You know what I mean? Something happened where that question mark is. Maybe the software screwed up. You know what I mean? I've seen that happen in older software stuff. So there is a situation when I would tell you that dog's not near that question mark. You know what I mean? You got to go figure out where that dog is. And digging in that hole is not going to be the solution. Maybe the collar broke at that location, but it's not there. And so that's the other thing that people need to wrap their minds around is just because the question mark is there doesn't mean the collar or the dog is there. You know what I mean? Like, and that's a really hard thing for people to comprehend.
Well, the best way you described it to me was ignore the GPS signal entirely. Mm-hmm. You know, that's just a point to start looking. Ignore that. And then you told me, you know, take that antenna off. If I have those communications, take that antenna off and to treat it like telemetry. You know, use things to interrupt that signal, to build that perimeter to look in. And I think that's the best way you had described it was, you know, forget the GPS signal and use that handheld and that communication signal like telemetry and with that antenna off. And, you know, we actually played around with doing that here at the house just to kind of even just show the kids. You know, we showed Addie, our oldest, and that way she gets separated from us or she's hiking in after her dog and not with us. You know, she's able to do that as well. Mm-hmm. It's pretty neat how it works like that.
Yeah. And the other thing I want to tell people is when you have a situation like this, don't be afraid to get a hold of us, email us, let us know. One of the big things also is let me know there's a dog lost. Okay. I am not quick to respond. So somebody will normally get a hold of me. You know, and like I said, I read your message and I'm not big on social media. And so I don't really follow. I mean, I'm like a stalker, you know what I mean? Once in a while I just skim through and whatever, but I seen those things, but I didn't put together that you had a lost dog in the woods and was having a collar failure. And so I felt horrible because by the time I got a hold of you, we'd run the battery, we'd run the clock out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we could have been working on that a whole day earlier. So I want people to know that if you're trying to get a hold of me, email, face, a lot of different ways that I'm not going to give out my cell phone number to people, but try to get a hold of me. But you got to let me know that there's a dog at stake, meaning I'm not going to be sitting here answering, messages after hours with my family because you need to update the software on your thing and it's doing something goofy. You know what I mean? Like that's not, I don't want to say a priority to me, but that's a Monday through Friday deal. We'll get that fixed, whatever. When you got a dog that's lost and you're having failures, I want people to relay that message to me because that's when I'll pick up and call on the weekend whenever, if I get that message. You know what I mean? Those are the situations that people just need to know. Let me know. I get some people, hey, can you give me a text can you give me a call when you get a chance? And I'm like, okay, well, Monday I'll give you a call. And then they're like, oh, I lost a dog. Well, I'm like, shit, if you had told me that you lost a dog and you could use 5 minutes of my time, I would have made time for that. But I get so many times where people all the time want me to call. And again, they're like, well, how much is a 15X collar? And I'm like, dude, I am not calling you on the weekend to talk about selling you a collar. You know what I mean? Like, so that's one of the things I want people to know is if you have an emergency with a dog, let us know because we treat that way differently than you trying to buy a collar and want to.
And we get this call a lot. I mean, it's not always this dramatic in a whole like life and death situation, but
yeah,
guys lose GPS, especially uplanders. I've noticed running barbed wire fences and boom, all of a sudden no GPS signal and they're at a loss. That seems to be the group I've been talking to a lot about it lately.
So let's finish the story now. So now, day 5? What like you? I mean, at some point you just keep going back. I mean, how did you figure it out?
So Jared had kind of chewed away at the hillside a little bit where this hole was, and like I had mentioned, originally it was straight up and down. So you go to dig in the hole. Usually, you try to go forward. Well, the way the ground was, you had to come in from kind of the top. And he kind of dug at it, a little bit here and there all week. And we just weren't convinced that she was in there. And at one point, we kind of lost even the beginning or the opening of that hole. And long story short of it, we went out there. We were 4 of the 5 days. That Friday, we didn't go out there. We were just, honestly, Thursday, we'd spent about 5 hours out there and we were defeated. We looked in every aspect that we could that made any kind of sense. And so Friday, we didn't end up going out there. And it actually started snowing. And I was a mess that Saturday morning when we actually did end up finding her because the kids were like, it's snowing. And I'm like, shut up. I don't care that it's snowing. We have a lost dog. And now I don't know where she is. And it was just another kick in that gut. Well, so Jared ends up going out there though. And I had thought, okay, let's get a hold of a metal detector. I'm like, we find the collar, hopefully we find the dog, but we have to find the collar to be able to figure out our next move in any of this. And so we knew, generally speaking, because we had that communication, that collar was somewhere near there. And so I ended up borrowing a metal detector, and Jared had taken it out there, and he'd gone over to the hole that he kind of, like I said, chewed away at a little bit, and he just turned it on. And he doesn't know how this thing works. He's, we're going to figure it out as we go.
I can tell you right now, I can't find a nail in a sand bed with a metal detector. So I'm really interested in your story, just so you know. I'm dialed because I've tried. If you can come teach me how to use this metal detector I got dreams of finding treasure. So anyway, keep going. I'm listening.
I can't say that I'm going to give you any much hope with this in the sense of the metal detector. Because Jared turns it on and it's, you know, the little head of it's kind of over the hole, and he's standing there, and he's standing on this hole. And he knows the dog isn't, say, below him because he had crawled in this hole farther. And, you know, he's got this idea of, okay, if I lay out this far and my arm's here, you know, I know a general idea of how far I'm in the mountain. Mm-hmm. And so he turns on this metal detector and it beeps. It does one beep. He doesn't know if that's it turning on. He doesn't know if that's it detecting something, whatever. It beeps once. And then he keeps hearing this weird, really faint kind of beeping. And so he turns the metal detector off and he kind of actually puts it behind him. And he keeps hearing this faint beeping. So he gets down next to where he thought the hole was kind of headed into the mountainside. And sure as heck, that dog was sitting there barking. And so if you can imagine hearing the most faintest beep, and that be a dog that's full out barking. And she has a pretty crisp, kind of sharper bark. It's not deep much. And so him hearing this beep, he's like, holy crap, that's a dog. And so he just goes to digging like a madman. And I guess he told me that he dug for like an hour and a half to 2 hours before he even called me. And he calls me and he's like, she's alive. I need shovels and bodies. And he has no service. And that's kind of virtually all I get out of him, except for like, I think I asked him, who do you want me to call? This gentleman, his name's Pete Walker. He had been out there 4 of the 5 days on his own looking for this dog. And he had walked down into this absolute, you know, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but shithole. And he got in there and was
only if it was a real shithole.
Oh, it was bad. Let's just say I had some other people end up coming out and helping, and they told me, kid, you're grounded. You're not allowed to go out here anymore. You brought your kids out here, you're grounded. But Pete had gone out there, and so I was like, Jared, I don't even know, you know, what kind of hole he's digging at this point. I don't know if he's, you know, belly deep in that mountain again. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to call Pete. He lives out there. And I'm like, and he's quite a bit older. He's lived out that area for 40, 50 years, running dogs equally amount of time. And so I'm like, okay, well, at least somebody's out here to at least maybe have his back or call and say your husband's buried alive or something, you know?
Right.
So I called him, and then I called a couple other people, and I was pretty fortunate. I had a friend able to watch the girls up with me, but we ended up going and meeting them kind of at a point that was close to walking into this hole. And so long story short of that, Jared dug for 6 hours straight on Saturday. And this ground, for every scoop you'd take out of the mountain, it was as though 2 to 3 more would fall. And so, you know, you have to be real careful where you're digging away and what you're digging away at, because it'd collapse. And realizing that as we're digging, you know, we're like, that's how we knew this dog was trapped in here, because we would have never, ever expected that she was in there. Like you even said, you know, I said, she is not in there.
Right.
But the more he dug away, the louder she would be. And he at one point even kind of dug away a different spot and was able to stick his cell phone in there. And there was kind of 2 tunnels to this hole. And anyway, though, so he ends up continuing to dig, and he dug probably 10 to 12 feet into the mountainside and about the same equally up and down, and then probably about 8 feet around. So if you can imagine, he pretty much excavated this mountainside by hand. And
does the train still run on that track? Or
no, it does not.
It's an undisclosed location.
Yes, I don't remember where that was.
Yeah, I don't know what we're talking about.
No, train doesn't run there anymore. It's old abandoned. But yeah, it's people, if they ever end up coming out there, they're going to think somebody like died or
they're going to think there's a body
there.
There's a body for sure.
Yeah. But so he ends up getting to a point that Letty pokes her nose out of this tiny little hole, and he goes to start just kind of peeling away and pulling away rocks, and it collapses. And I mean, a lot of dirt falls and collapses, and we're like, oh my God, our hearts just sank. And he just keeps digging and he keeps digging, and Pete, like I mentioned, Pete was there, and it was like he was taking the shovel and like just brooming away the little dirt. And Jared, he gets to a point that he could pick some bigger rocks out, and she kind of got her head out, and we all were just like, pull her out. And so he rips her out of the hill. And as he pulls her out, it collapses. And it collapses so much that the top of this hole that she was in, you could see into it at the top side. So here, her nose is kind of level with the ground where Jared's kneeling and digging her away. And as this dirt falls in, you can now see into the top. Well, she had found the dent, and I can't say it was big enough that she could stand up or anything. Like I said, everything kind of kept falling in, but it was obviously big enough. She was able to turn around in it, and that's where she was for 5 days. And it was a 5 full days. She didn't get pulled out until about 7:00 that night. But she came out right as rain. She was a little swollen, had a little edema. We didn't really realize that until the next day when I'm like, you look worse today than you did yesterday. And I've fed you and watered you like unlimited at this point. But yeah, she, like I said, came out right as rain. Happy to see us, that's for sure. And
I bet after 5 days, like, hey.
I know you were saying Jared could see her nose, and I thought he didn't like sit there and wait for her to dig the rest of the way after 6.5 hours, did he? Because I probably would. I'd be wiped out.
No, I'd dig a little bit, and then one of our other buddies, he'd dig a little bit, and then Jared just and he'd get back in there, and that was his adventure. That is for sure. He was digging away, and
that's the it factor that people talk about and can't put their finger on. My kids always ask, "What's it mean, Dad?" I said, "That's it right there."
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I'm glad you got the dog back because it was not looking good for
5 days is a long time. I've lost a dog for 5 days, and people who haven't, it messes with you. Like, that is a really long time. If you never hunted in the telemetry days, like, I guess back then it was a little more normal dogs staying out. You just were glad to get them home. But to know where they're at, kind of, at least in the general area, and not find them, that is, like, horrible.
Oh, it ate me alive because I'm like, what if she's right there and she's hurt? I thought, honestly, at that point, before we knew she was in that hole, I thought that she may have potentially, went to go in that hole and then backed out. And then because of the location of it, I thought she got knocked off that waterfall and it potentially, rang her dome. And here she is all confused and she's laying there.
Wandering down somewhere. The creek bed or something.
Yeah. And, that's why, when the girls were, it's snowing, I'm like, be quiet. No, don't tell me that. Because I'm thinking, she's exposed to the elements. I just didn't have any idea. But no, she was buried alive for 5 days. And she's good. She's back to hunting. She's happy as a clam doing it. And, man, I would have thought she would have been a little apprehensive even No, no.
You know that story about they have the barrel breaking where they throw a deer hide in a barrel, a dog in a barrel.
It's John Wick.
Was it
was John Wick. They'd throw him in that barrel, roll him down the hill.
Yeah, and he says, "Oh, did it make him break off a deer?" And he goes, "No, but it sure made him break off of barrels." I'd be like, "Man, my dog would be broke off of holes after that." I'd be like, "This dog come out. It's in a hole. I can tell you right now."
Yeah,
Shelby's at my feet. Like she don't want to be near it.
No,
that thing went on the ground.
I kind of wish that was the deal. The other day, no, they found that den, and I reached in there and I was pulling the dog out by 2 feet. I'm like, "Are you kidding me? I don't want to deal with this again."
Once they learn it too, like if that cat was in that hole, you never break her doing it.
No.
Like once they find one hole that a piece of game is in, I saw my dog go from never checking holes to like every culvert on the side of the road. Those dogs are in it. They are ready to go.
I bet you that cat's pretty appreciative too. He's probably wandering around going, "Man, that boy is digging. He must have loved that dog." I mean, he's probably talking in there going, "They're not coming for you." He's like, "They're coming for me." Like, "They're not coming for you." That cat's sitting there thinking, "They actually came for that son of a bitch." He's telling the story.
Yeah, no kidding.
Man.
One of us has got to get some relief in here.
Yeah.
Oh,
well, that's good. Like I said, I'm glad it's a good you
happy
guys found
ending.
that dog. That is awesome. Like as far as the amount of time and the ups and downs and emotional roller coaster, I can only imagine with 3 girls that you guys had to go through.
4
Man,
girls.
and trying to sleep. You know what I mean? Like that. It's just gotta rack your mind trying to just even chill out to go to sleep for that.
I can say I definitely didn't.
I bet you Jared slept pretty damn good after 6 hours of digging. Not only because he's sore digging, but the peace of mind.
No
He
kidding.
slept for 12 hours straight.
Yeah.
He
let him
sounded
sleep
rough
in,
when I
and
talked
finally
to
went and
him.
woke him up at noon.
He was really sick too through all of that though. I remember talking to him and it's like, dude, you sound kind of rough.
Yeah,
You sound like I do right now.
he was probably, that's honest to God, the sickest I've seen him in quite a few years. He doesn't get sick, but when he does, usually it's just something little, and this was not. He was, I felt so bad calling him, and then I felt even worse because then he spends the entire day on Tuesday digging. I mean, he was so sick he didn't go to work or anything, and then he's sitting here digging, and he dug Monday after I picked him up, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then on Saturday. And like I said, those other days, it was just say a couple hours at a time. But I would say there's probably a solid 12 hours plus of digging into that hole to get that dang dog out.
Good on you guys though. And your kids being there, that's a great example set. Like, don't give up. That's like a Billy Coleman moment kind of deal.
Yeah. Yep. And then one of these days, Addison, is it Addie?
Adeline. Addie. Yep.
Adeline. Addie. I know Addie, but she did a I just seen on your Facebook a science fair deal on scenting and stuff.
She did, and she actually ended up winning her entire science fair for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
No kidding?
Yep.
It's
She won the whole thing, and she's getting to go to state. Her project was, how does the air pressure and temperature affect the way scent rises? And she honestly came to me with about a billion different ideas because she's like, Mom, I want to use Captain. I want to use my dog. I want to do something with the science fair with this. And she had talked about how like temperature affects scent and how just like the young dogs versus old dogs. And I'm like, okay, well, why don't we start honing in on this whole idea? And I'm like, we know that temperature affects it, and we know, a young dog obviously isn't going to smell the same way as an old dog, just experience. And it was pretty fun doing it all with her. She had to do a lot of research, and the hardest thing about all of it is everybody's like, oh, well, on this day, my grandpa told me that on this kind of day when the smoke's doing this and
when the smoke's on the floor.
Yeah. And we're like, but why? And she finally was able to kind of have that breakthrough. And that breakthrough was scent attaches to water vapor. And so the way the weather is kind of working, how the air pressure and temperature and all of those things, how those things are functioning in a day is going to affect how that scent rises, because it affects how the water rises. Well, when scent moves
we should have her come
water,
in and
that's why.
And give her a little presentation to the DU Hound podcast.
No kidding.
I might be able to convince her. I don't know. She was so nervous even doing her presentation.
Yeah, but you don't have to do it in front of people. You do it in front of a computer. It's not hard.
Right.
Tell
I bet you I can convince her.
You tell her I'm going to be disappointed in her if she doesn't help me out and explain it to me, because I'm just like, is the smoke rising or lower? And I need a little more detail on this.
Yeah. Well, it was really neat because, Ad is kind of that. She took Where the Red Fern Grows very literal, and that has become like her favorite book. And she saved her money for 2 years. And this isn't, okay, we don't give allowance. This is hard-earned money. This is her scooping dog poop. Right? I got 4 kids. I can't afford that. I got a whole bunch of dogs. Like, I can't afford this. But yeah, she was scooping dog poop, taking care of, people's pets, and 100% on her own. And, I know she's mine, and I'm a bit biased, but she really is extremely responsible. And we had a litter of puppies, and we told her, hey, you want your own dog? Raise this one. See what it's about. And I'm not joking. She did. And that little dog turned out to be a pretty awesome dog. And so in that meantime of her raising her money, she was working with one of our other dogs. She was 9 when she finally had enough and bought her own dog. And she's done everything with him. And down to her paying for his dog food regularly and vet bills. We're pretty, you don't need to pay for everything on that, but okay, you want to microchip your dog. Okay, you can pay to microchip your dog or something silly like that. Yeah. Or, his yearly vaccines. But he, like I said, he's 100% hers, and she took what she knows with her dog and just the things that she's picked up on, learning in the woods with what her dog's doing and how he's behaving. Gosh, here, my house phones are ringing. Hush here. So sorry about that. Goodness sakes here. Gosh. Find another phone and turn that one off too. But here she was able to take her day-to-day experiences with their dog, and now she's applying it over to school, and she's teaching her friends, and she's teaching her teachers. When the science teacher comes to her and he literally says, this is probably the most original project I've ever seen in all my years of teaching. And then, she presents it, and the 8th grade teacher comes and says, just about the same thing. So it's been neat to see how just something that we enjoy as a family has really relayed over, not just her learning responsibility and her understanding her dog and just the overall lifestyle, but now she's been able to use it for educational reasons for, her own schoolwork.
Yeah.
So.
No, I think that's good. And like I said, the outreach, the little seed like that grows, and you know, that's what we need, because it's a good thing.
Yeah, it definitely is. And it was kind of funny because I'm like, well, man, I was talking to Jared about it. Like, I don't think this could have been a better timing with just, the way there is, on houndsmen and just what we do. It's hard. It's hard to explain to people who don't understand it. And then you do see a kid like Addie. It opens up people's eyes a little bit, and it opens them up even more when they see there's a lot more to this. And, her project being something as simple as that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not always as cut and dry, and it's not always easy. I've been running into people up in the woods sometimes, and, oh, what are you doing? I always, cougar hunting? I'm like, no, I don't chase with cougars. You can't do it here. And explaining to them, you know what I mean? And they're like, oh, wow. They just don't know.
Yeah.
There's not many people who really know. And then there's some people who just clearly misrepresent what we do. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
And so it's like we need that good PR or whatever it is for people. It's easy to be like, just leave me alone. I'll go do my thing in the woods and be grump, rah, 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 which is easy for me to do.
Which is Buddy when he can.
Yeah, when I can. But sometimes you got to be like, oh.
But too, with that, it's helping people understand the why. Why are we going and as other people would see it, being a grump, disappearing into the woods. And it's far from that, it's connecting on a totally different level.
I've learned sitting in different meetings and stuff like that, with people who sit on the other side of the aisle or whatever, how you want to describe that, and some of them are they're so agenda based that you're never changing their mind.
Yeah.
But even some of those that when you get down to the actual human to human communication and contact, they just don't know, you know what I mean? And so sometimes, those opportunities to explain things, that's not just like, oh, because I like shooting things. It's like, no, it has nothing to do with shooting things. You know what I mean? Like I like shooting. I like eating deer, so I shoot deer. You know what I mean? But I don't go out to just kill a deer. You know what I mean? It's the same thing with elk, and it's, for some reason with hounds, we always get lumped into the ethics of things, but it's tough because it's like, no, that's not why we do this. We really love the dog. You know what I mean? And if people could understand that the dog is the center of our world, for the most part, of a houndsman, you know what I mean? Like, that's what we think about all the time is our dog. And when are we going to take the dogs out? When do we get the dogs out? And I know my wife's all the time like, well, why don't you just get bird dogs? I'm like, no, because I love, and the second part for me is I love the mountains. I love being out there and walking to a tree and
going places you would never go.
Yeah. I see things in places. So that part of it for a young girl like Addie to be able to explain, her passion is really cool. And I think it's, we need more. We need a lot more.
How did she research all of it?
It's really neat because she's able to recognize, and I don't know any kid, especially her age, let alone many adults, but she's able to recognize kind of how small she really is in this world and how much she is a part of this world. I think so many people get caught in kind of this rat race of life and all of this. And I've kind of explained it this way before, but all the worldly crap, you're going to your job, you're doing school, sports, just the day-to-day life. And it's like, you go out in those woods, it's you and your dogs and those woods. And you're not top dog out there. You're not in charge in the sense of everything that happens, because there's so many factors that control what happens. And for her to recognize it's me and my dog, and we're working together, and we're navigating the ground, or this creek, or this ridge, or okay, now we're trying to problem solve how this cat, gave him the slip. For a kid like that to see it and really realize there's a lot more to this life than the phone and friends, and even, like I said, sports and things, but how small she is and how much of an impact that she actually can kind of have, but also how a part of all of this she is. We're one little piece, and we don't get to, just totally run the show, if you will, out there. You try to, but you end up with like the hillside caving in behind you and things like that. But for her to see that, and it's been really neat to hear her talk to, say, her friends and explain how important it is for her. She has a school dance coming up, and we asked her about it. She was going, and she looks at me and she goes, "Mom, can I just go run my dog?" And I go, "You don't want to go hang out with your friends? You get to have a night off and not see your sisters and stuff." And she goes, "No, can we just go run dogs?" I'm like, "You realize you're going to go spend the whole night with your sisters." And she goes, "I don't care. I want to go run dogs." I'm like, "All right." But it's awesome. Funny. There's obviously something with it that is a much bigger than I think we all even realize at times.
Yeah.
It's primal.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and wrap this up, Rashay. Like, really good information. I think I've circled the wagons enough trying to tell people what to do.
Can we quick recap?
Recap again for the fourth or fifth or sixth time.
Thing, everybody turn on rescue mode.
Yeah.
Turn on rescue mode before you even think you need it.
Mm-hmm.
That was a big one for me.
You normally on 2.5 second updates, you're going to get maybe 24 to 30 hours of battery life. On a mini less, you know what I mean? You'll get 20 to 24 hours on a mini collar. If you run 5-10 second update rates with rescue mode, you should see about 40 to 42 hours of battery life. If I remember right, when we were testing, the TT15Xs are phenomenal. You'll get days
like 4 of them.
Yeah, like 5 days. I mean, it's crazy. Cold weather affects battery life more. And if you get to a situation where the GPS signal is, you got a question mark, you got to go to that dog and look at the different types of question marks that you can get. Or, there's different reasons you can get a question mark. And if you're getting a question mark that has no GPS signal, that communication signal is a really important one to pay attention to. Your battery life, the update rate, and if you can change the update rate, and your bark alerts and detection. Another thing I would, Rashay, another thing I would have told you was to turn your bark detection on and set the bark detection to the lowest limit. So like 20 barks a minute. I normally don't like the bark alerts because I'm like, yeah, Shelby's barking.
I don't even think we have ours on.
Right. So in that situation, I would turn it on. Right.
Okay.
Because that way you might have gotten a message if she was barking that day or whatever, it might have said, the dog's barking 20 barks a minute. Right. And it doesn't take much to bark that much, that little bit, but that is just another piece of information that your handheld will go, so-and-so's barking. Shut up, everybody. Listen, you know what I mean? Like you would have known. It's just a piece of information. In those situations, every little piece of information can bring you closer to solving the puzzle. You know what I mean? And so bark detection is one that I know for a fact because I've had the situation where I lost GPS signal and my dog was named Bonnie, but it would say Bonnie is barking 20 barks a minute. So I knew as I'm trying to, for that dog, I was looking for a tree. I'm like, she's in a tree somewhere. She got a tree. I had a bunch of shit dogs at the time. You know what I mean? But she's the dog that was going to make it. And
that dog's got
her collar failed. Every other dog's in my truck, but and I never did find her. I never did find the tree, but it was like
you found the dog.
I did. The dog finally came out. Probably because I did the same thing you guys did when I nicked her or shocked her or something, and she probably ended up leaving. And
yeah, right.
Like, oh, but yeah, anyways,
you got the dog back though.
Yeah, I did.
You got the Hail Mary, and you know what? Yes. The dog came back.
Yep. But yeah, those are just the things. And the last thing is, if you're trying to get a hold of us or me or Jason or whatever, and it's after hours and it's a true emergency for a dog, please, please, please make sure you relay that information. Don't send me a Facebook
generic
message
ones.
that says, "Hey, can you give me a call?" Because like even if I get that and it's Saturday night, I got my kids. We're probably trying to do something. I really try to not focus on the business when I get home. Newsflash, W is a job for me. You know what I mean? Like I could get so wrapped up into that I lose what I enjoy in life. And so I really try to shut down and I'm not good at it. You can ask my wife. I really suck at it sometimes, but I try to make sure I hang out with my kids and I'll leave my phone. I'll leave my phone on my bedstand. And some days I'm just like, dude, half the time I think about just smashing it and going, like, can I go back to an old phone that doesn't have, no cell phone?
Flip phone.
Not even that. That's like no phone.
Corded
like,
one.
Can't get it, buddy don't have a phone. You know what I mean? Like I kind of miss those days. Like
no kidding.
Everybody talks about GPS systems. I'm like, dude, I want to go back to when, like, I'm like, I got to work. You call me at work. You know what I mean? Like I'm not at work. I don't know where he is. I don't know when he's going to be home. You know what I mean? Those old timers. It's like, you went home. You went to the grocery store. When he'll be back? I don't know when he'll be back.
When he gets here.
Yeah. But, so anyways, making sure that you just don't send me a message or an email that's like, hey, have buddy call me on Saturday night, because I'm not going to. Like, unless you're like, I have a dog out, I really could just use a few minutes of input or whatever. Those are the situations that I'm going to try to make an effort to call. Those are more a high priority than the other message. When I call, I'm like, hey, what's up? What's going on? Oh yeah. How much is a TT15X? Dude.
Yeah.
Ban,
the short questions like, hey,
you know how much it was?
Hey.
It was
like, no,
$349.99, but there's a surcharge that you just got dinged. It's called the Facebook surcharge. You know, it's a $50 charge right there just for me to answer it on Facebook.
Oh,
but cash or card, we pay the $50 surcharge. This is what we're gonna do.
Just let us know it is like a real emergency.
Yes,
because I mean, as houndsman, it is different. It's.
And that's the big thing for me, Riche, is I just wish you would have called me or I would have caught that on Facebook, because that was something I would have stopped what I was doing to make sure that I gave you as much information to find your dog as possible. And I just feel bad that by the time I slowed down to look at your post and see it, that battery is pretty much dead. You know what I mean? So
he would have dug 5 hours. For Jared
don't apologize.
My back is not apologizing, because I probably would have been there with a shovel. I'd have felt that bad. I'm like, oh man.
Jared took the brunt of that. That's for sure. Yeah. There's people out there that I'm like, you should not be out here. You've had like 5 back surgeries. No, I'm like, moral support strategy. That's why you're here.
Should check him at the door.
Yeah, I'm tech support.
Yeah, there you go. You guys tech support. You know what though? That goes far though. And I know there's a lot of other people that they're probably going to save their dogs because they will take you up on that. My situation, I was super fortunate. I don't know many dogs that come out of a hole after 5 days and let alone aren't being carried.
Cool.
So, that's great of you guys.
Awesome. All right, Riche, let's do it again. You tell Addie we need to get her on for her science fair.
Sounds good. I'll let her know.
Perfect.